Can y'all hear me? Yes, we're good. All right, so where to start? So the interesting thing about this talk is that Twitter is a main character of this talk. And with all of the changes at Twitter, it's made the talk evolve a little bit, but basically I owe a lot of my career success to social media and Twitter specifically. Currently, I work for Cassandra by Veeam, and I'm our community manager. And one of the ways that I found that job was that when I applied for it, my manager went and looked at my online presence. He looked at my tweets, he looked at what I was saying about technology, and part of that is what caused him to hire me for my role. So whether you like it or not, if you have an online presence, and who here has social media? What platforms do you all use? Twitter, LinkedIn, Mastodon. Cool, yep, so those are, well, like I said, Twitter's my main one, sometimes LinkedIn, sometimes Facebook. But if you have an online presence anywhere, you have a personal brand, whether you know it or not. So the thing is that you need to find a way to make your personal brand and your social media benefit you as an individual. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about kind of the history of social media, how I've used it to build my brand, and I'm going to give you some there's a series of 3 slides later in this talk that will give you the things that you need to answer to start establishing your own brand and the type of content you'd like to create. But first, we're going to throw it way the heck back to ICQ and AOL Instant Messenger. Anybody remember these? So what did we all do on AOL Instant Messenger especially? I remember I spent so much time deciding which font and color combination I wanted, which buddy icon I wanted, what I would put in my profile and my away messages, and how I would express myself. And when I think about that in retrospect, I was already presenting myself online and presenting myself as a brand. So that was in college. I spent a lot of time on AOL Instant Messenger and ICQ. And then, does anybody remember websites that look like this? If you go to this website, it's a designer out of New Zealand. It's called CameronsWorld.net. But if you actually go to this website, it scrolls forever and it shows you all of the horrible GIFs and MIDIs and the little like under construction guy digging, all these things that were part of the early internet. And I remember with my friends getting on like Yahoo GeoCities and stuff and creating pages based on maybe things we were into, things we were fans of. And again, that was a way for us to connect with other people online and start establishing a brand. So anyway, I graduate college, and as often happens, I move far away from my college city. And at the time, MySpace and Facebook were just getting started. And I wound up adding, a lot of my college friends to those 2 platforms because it was a way for us to stay in touch. And we would communicate. And MySpace especially, I used to be a recruiter, and I actually know several programmers who got their start programming by editing their MySpace pages. And again, it was a way for them to express themselves. So then I have a degree in philosophy, and that makes it hard to get jobs. So I decided to go back to school and get my MBA in organizational leadership and marketing. And in one of our classes, our professors made us make a profile on LinkedIn. And so on LinkedIn, I created it, and I connected with my classmates and my coworkers. But again, I didn't think any of this stuff would be here and be around almost 20 years later now. But it was. And this whole time, I was apparently branding myself, but it was very accidental. So what happens next is I move to Columbus, Ohio, which is where I live now. And I'm in a new city. I'm trying to figure out what is happening in the city. So a friend of mine who worked in social media told me to make a Twitter account. So I make my Twitter account, and I start following initially a bunch of like food bloggers, event pages, stuff like that, and just use Twitter as a way to get information, not realizing that it should be interactive. Like, I didn't even use my name. I used a picture of my dog. Like, this was back in the day when you didn't give your information out on the internet. It was way before all the stuff we do now. So I make a Twitter account, and eventually, later on, I started tweeting about technology and tech-related things, and that's kind of how my brand got started. So like I said, first lesson is if you have an online presence, You have a personal brand. Now, what is personal branding? It's just the practice of people marketing themselves in their careers. And I was just having a conversation with somebody about this in the hallway, about how developers don't always know how to promote themselves, or they're hesitant to. And I'm going to tell you now that modesty is not a career-enhancing trait. You need to promote yourself. You need to promote what you've been doing. And there are lots of ways to do that without sounding like a jerk or without sounding like you're bragging. And we'll talk a little bit about that tone for that. Personal branding does have a lot of different elements. It's based mostly on your online presence, and it's an ongoing process. It's not enough to just create a profile and leave it. So like, I have a blog that I haven't updated in years. That's bad social media. Don't do that. My other stuff, I do keep more up to date. It is, like I said, it's self-promotional. So you're going to be talking about the things that you're doing professionally and the things that you're into, and that's okay. And it has done nothing but enhance my career. The more I'm present on social media and the more I engage with others in our industry, the more opportunities I get. Job opportunities, speaking opportunities, travel opportunities, all the things that I'm into. The other thing about your personal brand, though, is that it applies in real life. And you'll see this with some of the speakers who, online and offline, a lot of us are the same person, and you can kind of tell almost based on somebody's branding on their social media who that person is in real life. Now, why does it matter? It matters because it helps you build a network. It helps you find your community. And this would not be a Cassandra Faris talk if I didn't talk about the importance of your community. And you find your community, and then that's who helps you find the opportunities that you want and who helps promote your social media. You can establish yourself as an expert. And this is how I started really using social media effectively. At the time, I was a technical recruiter. Agile and cloud computing were the new hotness, and I thought, well, if I'm recruiting for these things, I should understand what they are. And so I started going to user groups and meetups, and then tweeting with people who were, I wasn't even tweeting with them yet, actually. I would just go to user groups and meetups, and I would follow all of the people who were at those events on social media and just like sit and listen to what they wanted. Eventually, I started sharing career tips and advice, and that started getting me invited to panels and to organize conferences and stuff because I'd established myself as a recruiter who understands technology at a high level and who really cares about developers and their careers. And it makes you more approachable. I don't know how many people have come up to me because of something I posted on social media, a picture of my dogs, any number of things that I share. It makes you approachable and it makes you seem more like a whole person rather than just a coder or just whatever it is that you do professionally. The other thing that this does, kind of laying on that expertise, is it actually helps you build trust and credibility. So years and years of me engaging on social media and taking that offline has allowed me to become somebody who's trusted and credible within the tech community and within the developer community, even though I myself am not a developer. But the thing is, you have to be purposeful. And this is how that works. So when I know I mentioned I was following people on Twitter, and in Ohio, we have a conference called Code Mash. Code Mash happens at an indoor water park in the winter. It has 2,500 people, and I noticed a couple developers that I followed were tweeting with the hashtag Code Mash. So I click on the hashtag, and I follow every single person who's tweeting about Code Mash. And I sat back, and I listened to what people were saying and kind of followed what people were saying. And eventually I started engaging in conversations, and like I said, I got, all sorts of opportunities for jobs, for all sorts of things, and I started to establish myself as this recruiter who was credible. And then I realized that if I was more purposeful about what I did on social media, if I was more deliberate, I could actually enhance these things that were accidental, because I didn't intend to set myself up as a brand. I didn't intend to use it really as a recruiting tool or a job search tool. But I set myself up for that and started being a little bit more deliberate. And then years later, I started thinking about how did I do that? How did I create my personal brand? Well, to create your personal brand, you have to do a little homework, a little exercise. So these next 3 slides are the most important slides of this deck. if you're really trying to get yourself established as a brand, these slides are the ones that you'll want to go back and look at and think about and answer these questions that I'm going to ask you. So we're using our brands professionally. And so we're trying to present ourselves professionally. So what you want to do, and I suggest you get a piece of paper and a pen, or put this down in whatever notes app or whatever you use. But you want to sit and you want to think about these 3 things to start establishing your personal brand on the professional end. What are your technical specialties? What technologies and tools are you best with? Are you Java? Are you .NET? Are you Azure? What do you work with and what are you good at? And write down 2 or 3 things that are your technical specialties. And then think about your professional specialties. So these are the other side of things, the human skills, I call them. Are you a good mentor? Are you a good coach? Are you a good teacher? Do you learn quickly? Are you somebody who can naturally herd the cats or be a leader in some way? Those are your professional specialties, and they can also be a part of your brand and what you share online. And then think about your contributions to your team and your profession. And maybe write down the top 3 things that you're the most proud of, or the top 3 most interesting opportunities you've had. And once you have all of that, then you have, in a series of 8 or 9 lines of font, you have a list of the things that you do professionally and who you are professionally. And that can be the basis of the professional end of your content. But this is about personal brand. So you also need to think about who you are personally. And sharing your personal life on the internet, everybody has different tolerance levels. Everybody has different ways that they like to share. And so you want to think about what it is that you might want to share online. So ask yourself, what are your interests and your hobbies? If you look at my social media feeds, it becomes very apparent very quickly that I like soccer or football. Not American football, but actual football. I like board games. I am obsessed with my corgis, and I like to travel. And you can find all of that stuff on my social media at a glance. And every single one of those things I've shared has been a connection standpoint. At one point, I actually found a group of people who are both into tech and soccer. And I formed a little group of people who in America, we do something called tailgating. It's a tailgate party. You basically have a barbecue or a cookout or something in the parking lot of a sporting event before the event. And you grill burgers and you drink beer and you hang out with your friends. So I wound up finding this intersection of tech people tweeting about my local soccer team. And so I founded a geek tailgate. And we had probably 20 people who all worked in tech who were into soccer who would meet and hang out in a parking lot. And out of that group came people finding job opportunities, people finding all sorts of other opportunities as well, because I blurred my personal and professional life a little bit. Then you need to think about your beliefs and values. So things that are important to me include diversity, equity, inclusion, representation. I speak a lot on mental health and tech, and that's, I think, one of the most important things. But think about your beliefs and your values and what's important to you and which of those things you might like to share online, because that's how you can find people you can connect with more deeply. And then finally, think about your social, your family, and your community life. So one of my favorite stories about this is that 2 of my friends had their children going through, both of the kids are good, they're great, they've recovered, but 2 of my friends had children who were going through leukemia treatment. And I wound up putting them in touch with each other, and they wound up actually finding a community of other parents who were dealing with that, so you can find support. So whatever your social, family, community life is, those are also things that you can share, whether it's some situation you're going through or something that is important to you. So you write those 3 things down too. And then you need to think about how you connect, and this is where it gets really important. So you have to identify your shared interests. That list of things that you wrote, find other people who write about that stuff. Search it as a hashtag. Hashtags are great for that. So if you're into Kubernetes, which I work for a Kubernetes data backup company, if you're into Kubernetes, search hashtag Kubernetes and see what people are saying about it and follow them, because you have a shared interest. You can ask for advice or opinions. This is one thing I have always loved about tech Twitter in particular, and I'm understanding it's starting to happen on Mastodon and Blue Sky as well. But you can ask for advice, you can ask for opinions, and it can be something as simple as, I'm looking for a new suitcase, to I'm trying to find the best way to implement this application. And you'll find that technology Twitter and the technology social community in general is actually really willing to help each other out. So you can ask for advice and opinions. You can also give advice and opinions. So this is something that I still do sometimes. When people are wanting to get into speaking or wanting to maybe get their kids involved in technology and they ask about it, I will often respond to those threads with advice. And again, it helps you connect with people. And when you give people information they want, you've actually helped them. And helping people is the most important thing you can do for your personal brand. And you can ask people about themselves. This is another one I use all the time, especially when it comes to my dogs or a bunch of other things. But I will, somebody will tweet a picture of their corgi, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, what a cute corgi. What's their name? What made you get them? Have you had them before? And people love to talk about themselves. They love it. So if you ask people questions about themselves, they're happy to share that information, and then you can start finding some connection points. So those are your 3 kind of things you're going to consider when you're setting up a brand. This slide deck is on my LinkedIn profile, so you can find these slides and these questions there as well, and I'm always happy to chat about this stuff with people after as well. So then you need to decide which social media platforms work best for you. And I am myself in the midst of this with so many people leaving Twitter. I am working to figure out my own my next move in my social media strategy. I know how to set up the brand. I know how to set up the content. I know how to connect with people. It's just a matter of where is everybody going and where is my community going. And I'm starting to see a lot more actually Instagram, which surprised me. But a couple conferences I've been at lately, people have wanted to connect via Instagram rather than Twitter or even LinkedIn. There's a lot of content is going toward video now. I recently read a stat that TikTok and Instagram are actually beating Google in search among Gen Z when it comes to searching things like restaurants and experiences and events. TikTok is beating Google. That's wild to me. That's absolutely wild. And so you have to decide if you want to do that video content, do you want to do other things, and decide what platforms work best for you. So like I said, I am working on right now trying to figure out what my Twitter alternative is. And I've started playing around with Instagram stories more, which I never used to do. But I'll post semi-chaotic Instagram stories about what I'm up to. But I'm finding that the more I post Instagram stories, especially about conferences and especially about travel, the more people from the tech world are connecting with me on that platform as well. And then at that point, you start having conversations in your direct messages, you start collaborating, you start sharing advice with one another and getting to know people. So for me, the key to Twitter, and I'm going to say that this actually applies to Mastodon, Blue Sky, TikTok, and Instagram as well, know your hashtag. The first thing I do when I go to an event is I search the hashtag for that event. And I'll post something like, hey, I'm speaking at Devox Greece. Who else will I see there? Doing that is a really good trick for when you're going to conferences because you'll have at least one person who will respond to you. And I've done this several times. I was at a conference in Nashville called Music City Tech, and I had asked on social media who was at Music City Tech and wanted to get dinner. And 4 people responded to me. I didn't know any of them. But I met up with these 4 strangers, and we had dinner, and now one of them is actually one of my closest friends among the tech community. One mistake I think people make on social media is you follow a lot of celebrities. And you need to be following regular people. It's cool to follow celebrities and see what they're up to, but they're not going to engage with you. They're not going to help you advance your brand. Whereas if you just follow regular people, you start to get that. And Twitter needs to be a conversation. It needs to be asking in a back and forth. It's not just like an information blast or a post blast. And be deliberate about all of your profiles. So this is apparently a very blurry screenshot, but basically my profiles everywhere say, focused on the human side of tech. I'm a gamer. I'm the president of a scholarship for girls pursuing tech degrees. I work at Caston by Veeam, and I'm into soccer, and I like to travel. And I put all of those things in my profile, along with my pronouns, to show inclusivity. And that tells people at a glance what I'm into. And then people can decide whether or not they want to follow me based on those things. I never used to use Facebook professionally until I started getting more and more involved in the tech community, because at some point, you get to a point where it's, do I know these people professionally or do I know them personally? A little bit of both, because you spend so much time together and you get to know each other. And so I started to notice that a lot of people in tech friend each other on Facebook. And I used to be hesitant about that because I'm like, Facebook, it should be more private, it should be my friends. But then I found out that actually by friending people that I knew professionally, who I'd spent time with and actually liked, it allowed me to, A, stay in touch with them when we weren't together. And this was really useful during the pandemic because everybody was following what everybody else was doing. And then when you see people in real life, you can ask somebody how their kid's graduation went, how their marathon training is going, how their trip to Greece was, all of those things. So friend people. Like I said, it gives you insight into everyday life, so you can share, whatever it is that you want to share about your life. And I always will check in at an event. So I have my Facebook set to friends only, but I also, like today when I checked in for this event and posted about my talk, I made that post public. So when people search me and Google me or look at my Facebook feed, even if we're not friends, they can see on my Facebook a series of posts that are about my professional life that are public. And I've had people mention that as far as like inviting me to speak at a conference or even in job interviews. Instagram and TikTok are the ones that are really growing. Instagram is pictures, and now short form videos, the reels as well, versus words. So Facebook, especially early on, was very word heavy. LinkedIn is very word heavy. Twitter is very word heavy. There's not a ton of multimedia stuff on there. So Instagram is a place where you can share pictures about what you're doing. So this is from January 2020, I was lucky enough to speak at a conference called Antarcticonf. And this was a picture of me in the Antarctic waters after giving my talk at Antarcticonf. I found out about Antarcticonf through Twitter, actually, and I wound up signing up for it. But I wound up sharing, the whole time I was there, I wound up sharing kind of stories about my journey to Antarctica. And when I got back home, people wanted to talk about it. People wanted to ask me about it. People wanted to know how they could get involved in something like this. The other thing is hashtags. Again, hashtags are, I think, just a key on most social platforms now for finding what it is that you're looking for. And Instagram and Reels tend to skew as younger users. So Gen Z now is not kids anymore. Gen Z is starting to be professionals in the workforce. As a millennial, I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that people think that millennials were still kids and we're like lazy slackers and entitled, because we are adults. And some people still see Gen Z as a bunch of children, but Gen Z is now entering the professional world and having an impact. So you need to be able to connect with them. And then, of course, LinkedIn. Even as a former recruiter, LinkedIn is kind of a necessary evil for me. It's not often my go-to platform, but it's a good place to share professional accomplishments. My LinkedIn profile is set up, again, very deliberately. It has, my cover photo is a screenshot of myself giving this talk in Romania. And then generally when I change my hair color, which happens every few months, I change my profile picture, but not always. And again, it has the same stuff, focused on the human side of tech. I work in DevOps, all of the things that I'm into. So when you're on LinkedIn, there are some ways to make it better. One thing is that when you invite somebody to connect with you on LinkedIn, customize the invitation. So you meet somebody in the hallway today, and you want to connect with them on LinkedIn. Instead of just hitting that connect button, take the 2 seconds to write the note that says, hey, it was great to meet you at Devox. Let's connect on LinkedIn. What that does is, and this is something I didn't realize either until I did, but what that does then is, say 3 years from now, you're like, how do I know this person? You can go on LinkedIn, you can search your messages with them, and you can see that you met at Devox. And so it's a good way to jog your memory, especially if you're somebody who meets lots and lots of people. It can be a really good reminder. So customizing your invitations. When people connect with me blindly, I will often write back, hey, thanks for the LinkedIn request. What got you interested in connecting? When you ask people a question on the internet, when a sentence ends with a question mark, people want to answer it. And so people will write back to me, and sometimes it's, oh, I'm just networking, and sometimes it's, hey, I want you to come on my podcast. So instead of just blindly connecting and letting it sit, ask people why they connected and continue that conversation. And then share your projects. My LinkedIn profile, most of my talks are up there. I share posts about where I'm speaking and things that I'm working on as well. And I share my work projects because I do a lot of webinars and things for work as well. So that's how you make LinkedIn very useful. I also suggest you don't blindly connect with anybody. I did make this mistake early on because I thought I just needed numbers. And my view of social media is that I would rather have quality over quantity. So I don't necessarily want to have 1 million followers. I would rather have a few hundred followers who actually engage with me, because people who are just blindly following you, that's not, sure, it gives you some bragging rights and stuff, but it's not as useful or beneficial as if you're following people who are actively engaging with you. So once you've done your homework, figured out what you want to do, figure out which platforms are right for you, you want to pick 1 to 3 networks to really focus on. And I suggest this just because there's so many social networks and connection platforms out there. I didn't even touch on Slack or Discord or YouTube or all of the other platforms that are out there that we're using. But connect with people just on like 1 to 3 networks. For me, mine are Twitter, actually Instagram, and LinkedIn's probably my third. So those are the ones where I can, share the most. When you start and you make your new profiles, you need to connect with your family, connect with your friends, connect with your coworkers, connect with people you know directly. Because the people you know probably know people who would be interesting for you to connect with as well. So then that's how you start building that network outside of your current circle. And when you join any new, connect with interesting people they follow. And then when you join any new platform, just like I did on my early days on Twitter, you need to listen. Anytime you're entering a new community, anytime you're entering a new job, anytime you're entering a new situation, the best approach is to take at least a few moments to sit back and listen or read what people are saying. And then that gives you an idea of what's important to those people, and it gives you places to talk and connect with them. Some best practices, you want to be intentional. So my social media sometimes seems a little chaotic, but almost everything I post up there, I'm actually very deliberate about what I post and why I post it. I think about whether or not I want to post something. If I'm on the fence, I'll save it as a draft and decide the next day whether or not to post. But be intentional about what you're sharing. Be positive. Like, life isn't all sunshine and rainbows as much as I'd like to pretend it is. But when you follow people on social media who are just constantly negative or belligerent or argumentative, they bring you down and they don't benefit you and they're not going to help you and you're not going to be able to help them because they're just miserable people who like to complain. Social media personal branding, it is transactional, and this feels a little icky, but it's really not, because the thing about a transaction is it's 2 ways. So you might be asking people for help. You might be asking people to review your talk abstract, to look at your resume, to hire you for a job. And you can ask people to do things for you on social media if you've responded to other people who've asked you to do things. So I've had people ask me to do all sorts of things for them on social media. Giving advice on getting started as a speaker is a big one that I get. And by sharing that information, that is in fact a transaction, but it also helps us both. And it's, call it karma, call it whatever, but I very much believe that what you put out into the community comes back to you tenfold. You want to be unique, you want to be yourself, you want to find a way to stand out. My thing is I'm bright, I'm colorful, I wear loud patterned dresses, and it's become kind of a signature for me now. But you want to find out what it is that makes you unique. You need to be smart about it. So think about what you're posting. Be deliberate. Think about the benefit or the consequences of what you're posting. And finally, you need to be safe. So I know some people are not comfortable checking into locations or not sharing their location when they're away from home. And that's fine. You need to do what's within your safety level. For me, I used to not share anytime I was away from the house on social media, but I found that by sharing that, I actually get more benefit. Kind of some mistakes. Nothing on the internet is private. When I give this talk to teenagers, I make them say that out loud with me, because I don't care what your settings are. I don't care how locked down your stuff is. Screenshots exist. Photos exist. Accounts get hacked. So if it's something that you don't want on the internet, or you don't want on the internet associated with you as a person, don't post it. Simple. Just don't post it. Don't be the TMI person. I see this a lot with parents who want to share the contents of their baby diapers. I've had people who want to share like all of the dirty details of their nasty divorce. Like, don't share that stuff with the whole world. Share that with your friends closely rather than, we don't need that much information. It is hard to manage kind of the signal to noise ratio, so I am constantly and continually going through my feeds, especially my Twitter and Instagram feeds, and figuring out if it still makes sense for me to be following and engaging with the people that I follow and I engage with. Social media is a time suck, and if you're in a job where social media is a part of your job, it really can be a time suck. Last night after dinner, I was back in my room posting stuff on the internet, and same thing this morning, but it takes a lot of time. So for this, what I do is I will block out time in my day to do social media. I block out usually first thing in the morning, because I'm not ready to do other work. So first thing in the morning, I check my email and I check my social media profiles. It also sometimes gives you an idea of where the community is and what's going on and what people are talking about, and so sometimes that can affect what you're doing throughout the day. And I used to get so stressed out if I missed tweets or posts, and I eventually realized I'm never going to be caught up, and nobody's giving me a prize for being caught up on social media. So I pop in and out of it whenever. I don't necessarily monitor it all day, every day, and I don't try to read everything that comes through because it gets to be simply too much. I do respond to all of my direct messages because that's where a lot of connections happen. That's where a lot of the magic of social media happens, is in those conversations. But the thing about a personal brand is, and especially I think in this post-pandemic world, this has been a lesson that's been reinforced to a lot of us within the tech community, is that you need offline interaction. And offline interaction helps maintain your brand. And so offline me is very similar to online me. And offline me tries to be as helpful and friendly and open as online me tries to be. And that's allowed me to connect with people more deeply as well. Now, there is a process to this. I'm a big fan of taking things that seem squishy and putting processes around them so that they resonate a little better with engineers. So one offline branding process you can use, you ask who will be at an event, who will be at DevOps Greece, who will be at the reception, who will be wherever. Just ask who will be there. And then make a plan to meet up. I'm doing this with somebody at a conference next week. I asked who was going to be at DevOps UK. This person responded, and now we're going to get coffee next week, even though he's not going to be at DevOps. But he is somebody who my company is trying to partner with. And so by putting that out there, now I have this potential partnership opportunity with another company because I asked who would be at the event, and I'm getting coffee with this person. Connect with new people online after or even during events. This is really great, especially one of the exceptions to my LinkedIn customizing invites is sometimes when I'm in a hurry, LinkedIn has a QR code, and sometimes I'll just snap the QR code. But then what I'll do is I'll go back later, and I can see that because of that date, I connected with people at some event, or I'll send them a note back when I accept their request. I'll send them a note back and say, hey, it was great to meet you at DevOps. And again, then you know where you met those people, and that'll help you in the future. Helping people is the biggest thing, and helping people doesn't have to be anything big. It can be as simple as sharing a blog post that addresses something somebody was confused about. It can be as simple as sharing a call for papers or retweeting your friend who's looking for a job. All of those things are ways of helping people, and they don't take that much time or effort, but they are things that come back to you. And you need to keep it up. It needs to be an ongoing process. And there are times when you can have social media burnout, right? Especially if you've been on it for weeks and weeks on end at a series of conferences or something else has been going on in the world. So take breaks, but don't completely abandon your social platforms. Another thing that I do with my platforms too, and actually this is something I've added more recently, is your social networks. I know that sometimes will have Challenges where there might be people that you follow who don't agree with you politically or people who are triggering and upsetting to you. Don't follow those people. I make liberal use of the unfollow button, the block button, and the mute button because I want to feel psychologically safe in my social media platforms. And so I only follow people who I feel safe, sharing with, and who I feel safe around, and who think similar to me about certain things, which is a little bit of a challenge because it makes it a little bit of an echo chamber. But if you follow enough people who share your opinions, you don't all share all the same opinions. You just have some things that you share that are really important to you. This is back to kind of your beliefs and your values. And then being yourself. I know we all get this advice, from the time we're kids, is be yourself. And a lot of people are afraid to be themselves. I was one of those people. I used to just, had my normal brown hair. I dressed more like traditional, I guess. And that was fine, and I was comfortable with that. But I got to a point eventually where I became more comfortable being fully myself and showing up in a hot pink dress with purple hair and being a little silly and not taking myself so seriously all the time. And that makes you more connected. I like to joke that this slide is actually Cassandra, Faris, and emoji because it has so many of the things that I'm into. And those are the things that I like to talk about as well. And then helping people, like I said, that is the most important thing you can do. Be involved in your community, be engaged in your community, and help your community out. I promise it'll come back to you in spades. And with that, I am happy to take questions. I am happy to connect with people. I am at Cassandra Faris all over the internet. I do that on purpose so that when you search my name, you can find all my platforms pretty easily. You can find my profiles pretty easily. I keep that consistent. I sometimes tweet about hashtag Purposeful Personal Brand as well, which is kind of fun because now I can see, over the years, things I've said or responses I've gotten to this talk. But feel free to connect with me, and I am happy to take questions.